Carlos Santana is one of the few guitarists who can convey emotion just by playing. Warm, sobbing, and wild, that is his distinctive tone. However, there is a family tree, a spiritual inheritance from 6 individuals he regards as his gurus, that explains his voice. At the tip of one's finger was lightning. Another could, with no words at all, make a guitar weep. One of them was a member of a groundbreaking trio. Santana claims that another convinced him of the reality of reincarnation. Not only are they guitar heroes, but they also shape souls. Additionally, he is now bearing them all for the very first time. B.B. King, uniqueness personified. His distinctive style served as an example to a whole generation of artists, myself included. Carlos Santana exposed a crucial aspect of his sound with his statement, "Heartfelt profundity of B.B. King." Santana has long claimed paternity as one of 3 offspring of B.B. Bloomfield, Michael Bloomfield, Peter Green, and himself. King. Santana holds B.B. in high esteem. The King was never fleeting or subtle. It was articulated openly, maintained consistency, and was absorbed creatively. After King passed away in 2015, Santana spoke to Time about how King's unique style had influenced musicians of all generations. In his words, King's death was a spiritual as well as a musical loss. Along with Miles Davis, Bob Marley, and John Coltrane, he is now on the opposite side. His decision to include King in that group of deities shows just how profound the effect was. There was more to King's music than just blues. With 6 strings, it conveyed the truth. Santana's career was deeply impacted by King's influence from the start. Even as a young musician in San Francisco's Mission District in the 1960s, Santana was engrossed with Live at the Regal, King's seminal 1965 performance. For Santana, the peak of blues articulation occurred during that time, which he subsequently referred to as B.B. King, 67 to 72. Even Santana admitted in an interview with Forbes from 2021 that he could tell which B.B. It was pointed out by another guitarist, King, that the 67-72 tone had been held by Peter Green. Santana clearly studied King extensively, soaking in not only his licks, but also the emotional intent behind them, because of the degree of detail he used. King's minimalist melodies. His decision to allow the sounds to float had a profound impact on Santana's conviction that music should communicate, not only fill space. Santana has long said that B.B. King is the inspiration for his own style of extended emotive phrases, which are key to songs like Samba Patty. The idea that King had of allowing the note to weep. What drew Santana to B.B. was more than just the way they spoke. Humanity was king in his life. King, according to Santana's comments, was a man who brought a sense of joy, humility, and wisdom to the blues while also keeping it lighthearted. According to Santana, who spoke about King after his death, he had a joyful vibe on stage that made everyone feel welcome. For as long as he could remember, Santana wanted his performances to capture this unique combination of heart and charisma, sadness and joy. He saw King as more than simply a musician. He saw someone who could heal wounds and break down barriers of class, culture, and race via music. That part of King's art spoke volumes to Santana about her own dedication to harmony throughout her life. This is what we bring: harmony, oneness, and an invitation to accept yourself in all your glory, Santana said in an interview with Guitar World. All of us are one. For Santana, B.B. is historically and culturally significant. Thanks to King's blessing, he was able to combine his love of Latin music with the blues. To have that Latin feel and underpin it with blues guitar is, for me, the best of both worlds combined, he said in 2021. He understood early on that B.B. King was the linchpin between African-American roots music and the broader, global fusion Santana envisioned. The emotional vocabulary King created, full of longing, tenderness, and hope, was flexible enough to be layered over Afro-Cuban rhythms and Mexican folk sensibilities. Santana didn't just emulate King, he expanded upon his vocabulary, embedding it into a cross-cultural context that King himself would later praise. According to those close to him, B.B. King once told Santana backstage, "You took what I do and made it speak Spanish. That's beautiful, brother." Santana treasured that comment, not just as validation, but as an acknowledgement of shared lineage and mutual respect. B.B. King's role as a moral and artistic compass continued into Santana's later years. Even as Santana embraced modern collaborations and contemporary styles on albums like Supernatural and Blessings and Miracles, the spirit of King remained central. King remained Santana's 1999 resurgence, which included chart-topping hits like Smooth, was built on a foundation laid decades earlier, where blues and Latin traditions intertwined. His Grammy-winning work may have sounded modern, but it carried the fingerprints of King's slow bends, emotional restraint, and spiritual dignity. Santana's success didn't diminish his gratitude, it amplified it. In interviews, he regularly mentioned B.B. King's name alongside that of Tito Puente, Mongo Santamaria, and John Coltrane, an elite group of musicians who inspired him to combine groove, soul, and transcendence. Even ideologically, Santana echoed King's beliefs. B.B. King was a champion of racial harmony and civil rights, and Santana often cited him alongside figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, and Dolores Huerta. "I learned in the 60s from Martin Luther King and B.B. King," Santana once said, linking spiritual leaders with musical ones. To him, both spoke the same language, one of compassion, dignity, and equality. Santana's stage performances often became sermons of inclusivity, and in B.B. King, he saw the model of an artist who didn't separate entertainment from ethics. When B.B. King passed away in 2015, the world lost a musical titan, but Santana lost something more intimate, a personal guide. His public tribute called King one of a kind, a phrase he's used sparingly throughout his life. John McLaughlin, celestial and gorgeous melodies. "It's always intimidating to play with John," Carlos Santana once confessed, "but I already had something he didn't have." That raw honesty captures exactly why Santana's love and reverence for John McLaughlin wasn't rooted in imitation or fanboy worship. It was born from awe, challenge, spiritual kinship, and artistic expansion. Between 1972 and 1974, Carlos Santana experienced a profound transformation, and at the center of it stood McLaughlin, not as a rival, but as a mirror. By the time Caravanserai was released in October 1972, Santana was actively moving away from the radio-friendly Latin rock that made him famous. The public might not have known it, but he had already begun a parallel journey, one rooted in Coltrane, in devotion, and in silence. John McLaughlin, fresh from his success with the Inner Mounting Flame and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, entered that journey like a thunderclap. McLaughlin's band had stunned listeners with ferocious technique, spiritual urgency, and a seismic new standard for jazz rock. Even Santana's drummer Michael Shreve admitted, "It was like the moon landing. Where were you the first time you heard Mahavishnu live?" The respect was total. Santana described McLaughlin as busy restructuring the way a guitar sounded in jazz and music. What started as a spontaneous idea became Love, Devotion, Surrender, an album that Columbia Records had the foresight or luck to support. But for Santana, it was never about commercial strategy. It was a spiritual calling. McLaughlin, who had already become a disciple of Sri Chinmoy, introduced Santana to the Guru's teachings. Within months, Santana too was initiated, shedding not only his long hair, but also parts of the ego that tethered him to fame. As he once described, "When I met Guru, I found myself becoming less and less interested in things that used to excite me. I was searching for sound that was beyond the body." The sessions for Love, Devotion, Surrender in late 1972 brought together members of Mahavishnu and Santana's own band, including Billy Connery, Larry Young, but it was McLaughlin's presence behind the tone. Album's centerpiece trains a love supreme with an homage and passage. "Great Coltrane," Santana said, "even if we were rockers doing some of his holiest few years after he died, that act of violence became the foundation of inspiration." McLaughlin composed originals like "And They," to which Santana's signature lyricism, impressive, more open. Santana often used McLaughlin's melodies as a little and gorge, but beyond the notes, him most was McLaughlin's musical and cultural. In an interview, he said, "John plays from the soul of the mind when it's like he's channeling light." That T.O. Santana, McLean wasn't just a technical wizard, he was a vessel. Their shared devotion to Sri Chinmoy gave them a common language. "We called the album Love, Devotion, Surrender," Santana explained. "That's the path Guru gave us, AEH Guru." It's important to remember that not everyone appreciated the collaboration at the time. Rock audiences found the music too abstract. Santana fans still yearning for Oi Kamova were bewildered by the complex improvisational chant-laden tracks. McLaughlin's Mahavishnu followers saw Santana as a romanticist softening the edges. Critics were divided, but Santana didn't care. "We weren't playing for reviews." He said that we were playing to grow, to reach the supreme. Offstage, the dynamic between the two men was complex. McLaughlin was stoic, laser-focused. Spiritually towering, Santana, younger by 5 years, was curious, emotionally restless, at times overawed. He confessed to being intimidated, unsure of how to stand next to a player so formidable. It was Armando Peraza who reassured him, "Let him do his shtick. You already got something he don't have." That something was soul, heart, space between the notes. Santana didn't try to outplay McLaughlin. He tried to balance him. As John himself later said, neither of us dominates the music. Spiritual harmony creates musical harmony. Their 1973 U.S. tour brought that philosophy to life. Backed by Larry Young and Billy Cobham, the band played marathon 3-hour sets of Coltrane compositions, gospel reinterpretations, and cosmic jams. Reviews of the live shows were euphoric. Chicago, Berkeley, New York. In contrast to the studio album's mixed reception, the concerts captured what the record had only hinted at: communion. In private, their connection was even deeper. Santana once said that when he met McLaughlin, he started to listen to music with new ears. He learned not just how to play, but how to listen, and not just to the band, but to silence, to the spirit. Their conversations, as documented in their Viva magazine interview, were less about scales and amps and more about souls, heaven, vibration, God. Jesus is my right eye, Guru is my left, Santana declared. Their bond eventually evolved. The collaboration faded. Sri Chinmoya's influence waned, and both men went on to different paths. But the reverence Santana felt never disappeared. In later years, he would speak with the same awe. When I play with John, I learn, I still learn. Even decades later, when they reunited at Montreux in 2011, their chemistry hadn't dimmed. It wasn't about recapturing the past. It was about reigniting a flame they had both carried for years. Jimi Hendrix, the unseen collaborator in Santana's lifelong melody. Santana, right? I love your choice of notes. Hendrix, whose genius was both mythical and misunderstood, saw something in Santana before the world fully caught on. That simple phrase, offered as Jimi warmly shook his hand, became a spiritual torch passed from one sonic pilgrim to another. And for Santana, already consumed with the language of tone, melody, and transcendence, it lit the path forward. I'll take it, he later said. And he did. Not just the compliment, but the responsibility that came with it. Carlos Santana's admiration for Hendrix is not mere fandom. It is reverence, rooted in years of musical awakening, personal encounters, shared stages, and spiritual alignment. When Santana first saw Hendrix perform in the late 60s, he described it as witnessing something beyond supernatural. He wasn't exaggerating. He was there at the Santa Clara Fairgrounds in 1969, under the stars, under the influence, and under the spell of a man who played not just with strings, but with dimensions. He painted with his guitar like a galactic artist, Santana recalled in Service of Podcast. He took us to the galaxy and back in one breath. It wasn't about technicality, it was about otherworldly expression. They were both creatures of San Francisco's vibrant scene, breathing the same incense-laced air touched by the same psychedelic winds. Though they didn't record together, their spiritual kinship was undeniable. Santana remembered not just Hendrix, but his father, who once visited Santana's home. That kind of familiarity, quiet, soulful, familial, added layers to their bond. I miss Jimi's father, Santana once said, and I miss Jimi terribly. The kind of music Hendrix made, untethered, galactic, transcendent, was the very sound Santana had been chasing since he was a child playing violin in Tijuana. Hendrix gave that pursuit a face, a tone, a posture. And with that came Santana's lifelong question, would Jimi like this? Even when making his Supernatural album in 1999, Santana admitted, I had only one concern. Would Jimi Hendrix like it if he were here? The connection wasn't just musical, it was metaphysical. Santana has always believed music is a form of healing, a bridge between the physical and the divine. And for him, Jimi Hendrix stood at that bridge's highest peak. Hendrix was channeling the universe, Santana once explained. He wasn't playing notes, he was revealing portals. LSD may have opened some of those doors, both for Hendrix and Santana, but the difference was intention. Santana wasn't chasing chaos, he was chasing clarity through chaos. For me, it gave me more clarity. Somehow I can dance with insanity, and make it work. When Santana watched Hendrix at the Berkeley show in 1970, he didn't just see a performer, he saw a force. He compared Hendrix to John Coltrane and Charlie Parker, musicians who, like shamans, didn't just play, they traveled. Very few people can play fast and deep, Santana reflected. Hendrix could, but backstage, the chaos was different. With Devin Wilson, Hendrix's partner, dominating the room and inspecting everyone, Santana found it nearly impossible to speak privately with Jimi. There was a lot of lady swapping energy, he said. I just wanted to talk music, but it wasn't the place. That missed connection haunted him. It was the conversation that never happened. The spiritual debrief they never had. Still, the silence didn't dilute the message. In every note Santana plays, even today, you hear Hendrix. Not his licks, but his ethos, his freedom, his push to go beyond. Even when Santana collaborated with Eric Clapton decades later, he admitted to thinking, would Jimi approve? Because for Santana, Hendrix's opinion didn't die with him. It lived on, like a whisper behind every bend of the string. And then there was Woodstock. Both played, though not together. Santana's set was hallucinatory. He famously played Soul Sacrifice while tripping on mescaline. Hendrix closed the festival days later with the Star-Spangled Banner, turning distortion into protest, reverb into revelation. For Santana, the message wasn't lost. It was a reminder that music is a weapon against apathy, a cry from the soul of a generation. Jimi was speaking for all of us. Santana later said, through that guitar, he was showing the world its reflection. Santana also understood the tragic beauty of Hendrix's brevity. Some people took acid and never came back, he noted. But Jimi, he gave us a glimpse of something we might never see again. Santana considers himself lucky, not just to have survived that era, but to carry its spirit forward. In his own words, I know I am worth more than my house, my bank account, or any physical thing. When I hit that note, if I hit it correctly, I'm just as important as Jimi Hendrix. That's not arrogance, that's communion. It's fitting that Santana often describes great musicians not by their speed or their scales, but by their ability to induce chills. If you can't give yourself chills with one note, he once said, you won't give it to anyone else. Hendrix could give chills, so could Miles Davis, so could Peter Green. And in time, so could Carlos Santana. Thanks in part to Hendrix's hand on his shoulder and that unforgettable line, I love your choice of notes. Gábor Szabó, Hidden Muse. As soon as we grew up, we went to Gábor. With those words, Carlos Santana placed Hungarian jazz guitarist Gábor Szabó in the pantheon of artists who most profoundly shaped his musical outlook. Unlike many of his peers who sought complexity or flash, Santana saw in Szabó a rare kind of integrity. Santana described Szabó's playing as fantastic, spellbinding music, a perfect phrase for a guitarist whose legacy continues to echo through the grooves of Santana's own recordings. Santana first encountered Gábor Szabó in the late 1960s, during a formative period when he was building the signature sound that would electrify Woodstock and reshape global pop. Szabó, by then already a veteran of the US jazz scene, had immigrated from Hungary after the failed 1956 uprising, carrying little more than his acoustic guitar across the border into Austria. His story, of escaping political oppression to become a world-class artist, resonated with Santana, who was himself navigating the turbulence of the American counterculture as a Mexican immigrant in San Francisco. Szabó had joined the Chico Hamilton Quintet in 1962, developed his voice at Berklee College of Music, and released a string of exploratory albums, including Spellbinder, Jazz Raga, and Dreams. But it was Santana's 1970 reinterpretation of Szabó's Gypsy Queen, fused seamlessly with Peter Green's Black Magic Woman, that brought Szabó's work to mainstream audiences, winning Santana a Grammy and giving the Doors their intro to the end. That moment of synthesis wasn't opportunistic. It was reverent. Gypsy Queen became not only a staple of Santana's concerts, but a tribute to Szabó's trailblazing musical vision. Szabó's influence went far beyond one cover or album credit. Santana saw in him a kind of musical alchemy that fused cultures without diluting them. While critics struggled to categorize Szabó's moderate avant-gardism, Santana understood it intuitively. Szabó blended Indian classical drones, Latin grooves, and Hungarian folk melodies into a sound that refused to be boxed into jazz, rock, or world music. It was all merging without becoming confusion, fusing, all coming together very naturally, Santana later said, describing the sonic world Szabó inhabited. At a time when pop music was just beginning to entertain deeper lyrical and harmonic ideas, Szabó was already miles ahead, reinterpreting tracks like Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit and transforming standards like My Foolish Heart into entirely personal expressions. His playing was fearless yet refined, mystical yet grounded. Santana often compared Szabó to Hendrix, not in terms of volume or aggression, but in his equally revolutionary use of feedback and tone. Where Hendrix used feedback in a wild psychedelic fashion, Santana noted, Szabó used it like a drone because he was more into Indian music. Their personal relationship reflected that same blend of reverence and resonance. After they met in 1966, Santana and Szabó became close, with the Hungarian guitarist even staying at Santana's home. Santana observed Szabó's introspective nature, noting Gábor was very focused on Gábor. This wasn't ego but dedication, an obsessive need to hear, critique, and refine his own artistic output. Santana admired how Szabó could take something like Autumn Leaves and immediately make it like it's the first time you ever heard that song. He emphasized that this was the work of a sole personality, not an egoist, a distinction critical to Santana's own artistic ethos. According to him, Szabó's gift lay in his ability to strip a song to its emotional core, then rebuild it from the inside out. The connection between the two men extended into lifestyle as well. Both were seekers, spiritually inclined, culturally hybridized, and driven by a belief in the redemptive power of sound. Szabó's relative obscurity in mainstream music has always been a source of quiet frustration for Santana, who believed that Szabó's contributions were as significant as any of the so-called legends. "We all wanted to be B.B. King when we grew up," Santana once said, "but as soon as we grew up, we went to Gábor." In those words is a subtle rebuke to a music industry that often rewards spectacle over substance. Szabó's self-taught genius, shaped by hardship and exile, never translated into great wealth or long-lasting fame. He died in Budapest in 1982 at the age of 45, succumbing to complications from substance abuse and chronic illness. Yet Santana has continued to speak his name in interviews, reference him in liner notes, and honor him on stage. Even in his later years, Santana has returned to Szabó's work as a source of nourishment. Albums like Dreams and Miserab, with their daring blend of jazz, classical, and Eastern motifs, remain sacred texts to him. "Gábor showed me there were other possibilities with the guitar," Santana once said. That simple statement encapsulates why Szabó mattered so much, not just to Santana, but to the evolution of fusion music. Wes Montgomery, it's like being inside of a Rolls-Royce. When you hear Wes Montgomery for the first time, it's like being inside of a Rolls-Royce. Carlos Santana captured the essence of a guitarist who forever altered the trajectory of his musical journey. Santana, revered globally for his distinctive fusion of Afro-Latin rhythms and psychedelic rock, has long acknowledged that Wes Montgomery's influence is foundational to his identity as a musician. Despite being widely associated with the raw energy of blues and rock, Santana credits Montgomery's smooth, elegant, and emotionally precise playing as a key source of inspiration that expanded his understanding of the guitar as a spiritual and expressive voice. In an interview conducted on June 12, 2024 with WFY's Kyle Long, Santana spoke with deep reverence about the Indianapolis-born jazz guitarist, drawing connections between Montgomery's artistry and a broader philosophy of music that transcends genre and time. Santana's earliest exposure to Wes Montgomery came in the form of vinyl records. In the mid-1960s, before 8 tracks and cassettes, records were how young musicians like Santana absorbed new sounds. He vividly recalled skipping school with friends to hang out at a house that had just 3 albums: The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Jimi Hendrix's Axis, Bold as Love, and a Wes Montgomery record. Among those revolutionary records, it was Montgomery's that struck Santana with its refinement and soul. It just sounded so evolved. With class and elegance, he remembered. Santana described the moment as life-changing, likening it to discovering a universe, a galaxy, alongside other genre-bending guitarists like Gábor Szabó and Bo Lassit. The emotional impact of Montgomery's death in 1968 left a deep scar on Santana, who was only 20 years old at the time. "It felt like someone in my family had left," he said. "I remember feeling like I was frozen in time." Montgomery, who passed away suddenly at age 45 from a heart attack, had by then already become a personal icon for Santana. "I loved driving around the streets of San Francisco playing Wes Montgomery's music," Santana recalled. Albums like Movin' West became a soundtrack to his life. "He turned everything into a classic the way he touched it," Santana said. Even decades later, the joy and gratitude Montgomery's music evokes in him remains undiminished. "He just makes the day better," Santana explained. "He fills my life with gladness and gratitude," his notes. The depth of Santana's admiration for Montgomery also comes from the respect others in the jazz world had for him, most notably John Coltrane. A lot of people don't know that John Coltrane wanted him in his band, Santana revealed during the WFY interview. For Santana, this detail underscored Montgomery's rare status as a musician who defied categorization. Though Montgomery is typically described as a jazz guitarist, Santana argued that his work went far beyond the boundaries of jazz. "It wasn't even jazz or any of those terms anymore," he said. "It was just universally accepted music." This view reflects Santana's own approach to genre, where Afro-Cuban rhythms, blues phrasing, and psychedelic flourishes blend without apology. What resonated most deeply with Santana was Montgomery's gift for emotional clarity. In an era when many guitarists were chasing complexity or speed, Montgomery prioritized feel. His use of thumb picking instead of a plectrum gave his tone an earthy human quality that Santana found irresistible. More than the technique, though, it was the intention behind the notes that mattered. Santana once remarked to Downbeat magazine that idea, that one guitarist could simultaneously articulate melody, harmony, and rhythm, helped Santana evolve his own layered, sustained style. During the recording of Abraxas, he told his band that when he plays a long, lingering note, he's channeling what Wes taught me about making each note sacred. Santana's reverence for Montgomery goes beyond fandom. It borders on philosophical alignment. He believes Montgomery embodied a kind of grace that few musicians achieve. Grace in tone, grace in phrasing, and grace in purpose. Wes Montgomery didn't just play jazz, he played joy. Santana told students during a master class, Carlos Santana carries their sounds with him every time he plays. These 6 names aren't just influences, they're part of a legacy that spans generations. Who's part of yours? Which guitarist made you feel the music for the first time? If this story moved you, give it a like. Subscribe for more voices, more memories, more legends.